So when I explain to someone that I have dissociative identity disorder, I used to explain it as, it used to be called multiple personality disorder, because I would want them to have some kind of reference to understand the validity of what I'm experiencing. But I now understand that it's better not to go that route, because then people's automatic assumptions and societal stigma and things like that are going to get in the way. If you talk about it like it's this brand new discovery, which is basically what it is, we're just now learning about the details of why it exists in the neurobiology of living with a dissociative identity, people are going to be much more open and receptive to validating the experience. And so when people ask about my condition, I explain that it is a neurodevelopmental disorder that I only recently found out about, and not much is known about it, and so it's hard to get help for it, and I've had to be really creative on figuring things out. And basically the left and right brain hemispheres don't communicate with each other, and it makes life experience really different and makes random things that seem very simple a little bit more challenging, because the mental processes are more complex, because the left and right brain hemispheres don't have proper communication with each other. And on top of it, parts of the brain have formed differently, and the way that the brain encodes memories and stuff is a little different. And if there's any kind of stress, I risk my frontal lobe shutting down. And so reducing stress and having coping routines and rituals is crucial for my ability to function. Not because I'm overly emotional or overly sensitive, which is the general assumptions that can be made, but because my neurobiology is different. And to live successfully, I have to get to know my own unique neurobiology and learn to work with it. And when I present my dissociative identity disorder in this manner, people take it more seriously. Mental illness, there's so much stigma around it anyways, and it's labeled as more of an emotional experience than like an actual disorder. And DID isn't just a mental illness, because mental illness, it can start at any point in your life. It can be treated with medications. And there's a couple other details that allow dissociative identity disorder to be effectively classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder, not a mental illness. And so once we have like this understanding and shed this light on the situation, it's more understandable that things are going to be challenging, and meds can't fix it, and it's hard to find treatment and care because it is a neurodevelopmental disorder that doesn't get discovered till later, and very little is known about it, and effective treatment methods are still being created. The treatment method I'm using was just created in 2017, and so I've had to apply it for myself. There's no doctors that have been able to walk me through it. And so the recovery has been more complex and unique and challenging than if it was, maybe something else. And so this is the way that I explain my diagnosis to other people. And I keep the focus on what they need to know in terms of how it will impact my experience with them. Because there's a lot of details about living with a dissociative identity that aren't going to help other people understand me or connect with me. And I wish they could understand and know about all the details of what I go through, but that's just not reality. When other people are going through stuff, I can only handle the cliff notes in terms of fully comprehending and understanding in a way that I can show up unconditionally for them. And so, when it's a really complex disorder, the goal is just to give the cliff notes in order to build a bridge between worlds. I'm not trying to make people understand everything I go through. I just need to make people understand enough about what I go through so that when we're experiencing life together, they can have a greater understanding for what I need to do to take care of myself, basically. And so I keep things as simple and general as possible, and I make sure that I keep it relevant. Because I could go into all the different complex details, but it's just so much information, and it's so out of most people's paradigm that they're just going to get overwhelmed and their brain's going to kind of shut down and they're not going to know how to engage with the information. And so when I explain my diagnosis, it's less of a goal of, I need you to understand my whole world, and less of, I need you to accept and understand and validate every aspect of my experience, and much more about, here's what you need to know to understand why I interact with the world the way that I do. Only information relevant to explaining that aspect of things is what I focus on when I'm communicating about my diagnosis. And I keep the focus also on what's within my power, because when I explain my struggles, people shut down because they don't like to see struggles that they can't help with or understand. And so when I focus on, doctors have failed me and it's really hard and I'm going through all of these struggles, I can tell that people don't know how to respond because they're overwhelmed and they want to help, but they don't know how. And they're just kind of left in this speechless zone of, do I just say I'm sorry, or do I say I believe in you? Like, what if I say the wrong thing? And so to bridge that gap, I express the struggles honestly, but I always conclude my paragraphs or sentences or whatever it is with something positive and something that is within my power, or is within our power as, friends or family or whatever the interpersonal relationship is. And so, I'm going through all these struggles and I switch and I don't remember things and this and that. But I do daily meditation and I'm using affirmations, and through that I've seen some positive change, or I see hope for getting to where I want to be. Always ending it with something positive, or at least something that's within our power. It's really difficult, but at least I found this book that explains an approach that is much better than the ones I've tried before. It's not like, yippee, everything's fine and dandy, but it's this glimmer of hope, something to hold on to. And so when I explain things, I keep things as general and basic and abstract as I can. I keep things as relevant as I can. How does this information affect our experience together? Instead of overwhelming with all of the details. And then thirdly, I always end with something positive, or at least something that's within our power, because that helps build a bridge within the communication and the relationship, rather than bombarding someone with all of the hopeless things in my life and just like, here's this, now reply. That can really be difficult within relationships, because people want to help, people want to understand, and when they can't and they feel powerless, there's not much power within that relationship or within that conversation. And that's where insecurities can leak in, and just other things that can damage the connection. And so building as many bridges between worlds as possible is always the goal when explaining my diagnosis. And they don't need to understand the details, they don't need to validate what I'm going through. I just need them to understand enough to know that my life experience is going to be different, and here's a basic understanding of why. And with that information, interactions can improve, because there will be this greater extent of compassion for, what's happening, because there is this baseline of understanding, and it's not based in, oh, you have this emotional sensitivity. It's based in, oh, your brain's wired different and your automatic responses are different, and that can cause things to be a little intense sometimes. Building a bridge of understanding is always the goal. And the hardest lesson I've learned with all of that is taking responsibility for my own healing journey. Because when I would share what was going on, there was this part of me that was so deeply lost and so deeply desperate for help that in the back of my mind, I kind of expected people to try to show up for me in big ways. And, that's what I needed. And I didn't feel like I had the power to do that. And so I was, it was just there in the back of my mind when I would share my struggles. And of course, people didn't have a big magical solution. And so there is this, invisible disappointment that had kind of occurred silently. And that weighed on some of my relationships. And so really just taking ownership for, this is my healing journey. And it doesn't even have to make sense to me yet, but it is within my power and my responsibility. And if I ever expect someone else to step in and take care of it, I'm forfeiting my personal power, and it's only going to cost me in the end. So yeah, I was first diagnosed, years and years ago with like bipolar and major depression and stuff like that. And that was difficult because sharing that diagnosis was difficult because I felt very powerless, and I felt like all my power was in doctors and medication and in the hope of breaking stigma and stuff. And so now that have an accurate diagnosis of DID and have done years of research on the brain, I can understand the neurobiological aspects of why I do the things I do and why I experience the way things I experience and why I feel the way I feel and all these things. And so it's been a really long process, but it's now I'm able to validate myself. I'm able to give myself and my parts and my struggles and my pain and my experiences the validation I was seeking from other people. And that makes sharing my diagnosis easier because I'm not putting those expectations on people, I'm not afraid that people are going to invalidate my diagnosis or my experiences or my pain or my struggles because I've already done that. And so it's taken care of. It's not risking that.